But before we do that, just tell me, how many women have you approached in say last year? And he said 3. And I said, right, okay. And again, it goes back down to he is basing his skill level and self-esteem on approaching approximately 3 women a year. That's not enough data to really look at things objectively and go, okay, this is what I'm doing wrong. His outlook is, women don't like me. What's the point? What's the point? Women don't like me. So what we're getting from that is we need a bigger data sample. Right? I always say to my guys, get 100 approaches, 100 interactions under your belt. That will give you a fair sample of what really is going on.
Life today is chaotic, unpredictable, and constantly shifting. But within the chaos lies opportunity, and we're here to seize it. This is Generation Uncharted. Johnny, dating coach extraordinaire, thank you so much for coming on to Generation Uncharted. How are you?
I'm great, Lewis. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this chat.
Me too. So let's jump straight into it. So we're at a point where most people feel really disconnected, right? But we've got so many dating apps now and tools at our fingertips to really help us connect, but it's not really helping. So I wanted to ask you as the first question, despite all the tools at our fingertips, why are we so disconnected than ever? And why are men finding it so hard to date?
I think the issue we have is we have to ask ourselves the question, why are we here? Why are we in a place where we need to use an app, right? And I think we can drill it back down to an access problem, right? We don't have access to a landscape where we're meeting the right people. So for me, and I can speak probably for a lot of my generation, we learn through the school of hard knocks, which is going out, on that commercial high street scene that seems to be dwindling away now, sadly, and taking a risk, build up the courage to talk to people and try something a bit different, something new. And over time, you'd refine what you're saying, what you're doing, and you'd make impact. But with the normalization of these apps, I think the new generation are completely missing the part that I just spoke about, right? They're almost seeing it as a substitute, when reality is you learnt your skills through the hard knocks. So if you're going on these apps and you're getting frustrated and maybe you do get a match, you're still going to turn up with maybe the sort of inadequacy you can imagine. So I think that's the frustration loop people are experiencing. And also, I know for men, it's completely stacked against you. I mean, I'm sure you've got a female friend, and you look at her apps that she's using and the amount that she's getting hit up, and then you speak to one of your guy friends and it's nowhere near, and you think, Jesus, if that's what we're measuring our self-esteem and our success on, it's a complete false economy. The real thing is to get out there.
What's really interesting is that in doing the research for this episode, I was actually blown away. I mean, I'm 9 years into a relationship, so I'm sort of removed from a lot of this stuff. But I found it really worrying, I guess, to think that, I mean, some of the stats were saying, there's only like the top 10% of men are really getting swiped on. So you have all these average dudes, for lack of a better word, that are getting no attention at all. And it's completely stacked in a weird way. And then obviously, as you're saying, people aren't getting that experience of being rejected 8 times, but actually 2 of those times something great happened, and that gives them the courage to keep going. But I think this is why speaking to you is so interesting, because you have spent your career teaching men how to develop those real life confidence and how to approach women authentically in person. So what's been the most effective way that you have found and seen men actually push through sort of the modern struggles and actually grow and get some results?
Well, first of all, and this comes fresh of a conversation that I've had with a client last week. And I said, how many, we're going to sign you up for this program. But before we do that, just tell me, how many women have you approached in say last year? And he said 3. And I said, right, okay. And again, it goes back down to he is basing his skill level and self-esteem on approaching approximately 3 women a year. Now, if you're only approaching 3 women a year, that's not enough data to really look at things objectively and go, okay, this is what I'm doing wrong. I can maybe tweak that. Let's just say 2 of those interactions, maybe all 3 of those interactions didn't really go his way. It didn't make impact on approach. His outlook is, women don't like me. What's the point? What's the point? Women don't like me. So what we're getting from that is we need a bigger data sample, right? I always say to my guys, get 100 approaches, 100 interactions under your belt. That will give you a fair sample of what really is going on. It gives us something to actually look at rather than that's such, anyone that's in the business of IT and tech and, they're managing data, they ain't got a job if you're looking at that sample,
If I were a guy that was looking to go out and date someone in real life, but I'm absolutely terrified, and you've got that anxiety of she's gonna think that I'm, a serial killer or whatever, or what if I get rejected? Like, what are some of the things that you tell your clients to sort of think about to give them the courage to go and have that approach?
Yeah, well, first of all, what you're talking about there is what you're telling yourself, right? So I think a big thing to take away from this is what you tell yourself is what you project onto others. So if you're coming from a place of uncertainty, and you're telling yourself these things like, oh God, I hope she likes me, then that becomes the experience they're having of you. And I've said this on other podcasts before, like the number one thing a woman wants to feel is safety. And if you're going over there with this dialogue in your head, you're going to come across as unpredictable. So they're going to have, I call it premature ejaculation. They're going to eject quite early because they don't feel safe in your company. So you've got to prime your mind into a place that gives you confidence. And that might just be coming up with a phrase. For me, it's always, it's on. It's on. I see someone that I like, I go, all right, it's on. And then you take note of all the mannerisms that follow. I'm already analyzing myself, observing myself. Like if I'm going, it's on. I'm getting into cheeky mode. I'm getting to see what I can get away with, versus, should I? I don't want to turn up as that guy.
Yeah.
So mindset's important. Eye contact. You've got to hold eye contact. I know in some cultures it may be seen as rude. Well, if you're over here in London, which I consider the dating capital of the world, you've got to hold eye contact, right? It builds trust. And again, it ties into safety. Spatial awareness, right? Now, this was a big thing that came out of COVID, the social distancing. The social distancing always existed in my work. Why would you be any more closer than that to someone, right? It's quite imposing. So I always give a rule when you approach, always have at least arm's distance away. And in any moment that you feel like your body language is off key within the interaction, just stop what you're saying and correct it. If that means, let's say you've stopped someone in the street and there's quite a lot of traffic between you two, just take the initiative, just stop what you're saying and just move out the way. Maybe put your back on the wall. This also gives them the opportunity to leave at any given moment, right? Which is, again, it ties back into safety. There's a lot of things that are going on when you approach someone in a woman's mind. They're thinking, what is he? Is he a charity worker? Is he a club promoter? Is he going for my bag? What's happening here? So you've got to give the reassurance that's not going on, which leads me to my next point. You've got to let them know why you're there. Like I've had it when I've working with clients, they've approached women on the street. They've had an amazing interaction. I'm watching, taking notes, and he comes back. And I go, wow, man, that was a great interaction. I see the smile on her face. You're really enjoying it. You got a number, right? He goes, nah. I'm like, what do you mean you didn't get a number? Like, what are you talking about? I mean, she probably thought, it was the village invalid had been let out for the day. And so...
What should people actually be asking for on that? Because when I was researching this, now people ask for like, can I get your Instagram or your Snap, which I don't even have, or your number? Like,
Snap is a very... When you're working with the Middle East guys, that's more of the thing they're after. The Snap, that's like a cultural thing there. Because it's very conservative. But yeah, Instagram is the play. Instagram is the play because, look, there's only so much you can communicate in that moment, right? But with Instagram, you discover so many more talking points. And look, let's just say that this person was coupled up, right? But they did enjoy the interaction with you. And if, okay, well, and then you do even go to get their details. You don't know what's going to happen 18 months from now in their life, but you've both got that window into each other's world to see what's going on. And then maybe that opportunity can come to fruition later on down the line.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, just something to pick up what you said there, because I know this from friends. How do you deal with the whole I've got a boyfriend thing? Like, because I think some men feel like, I want to approach that girl, she looks really nice. Heaven forbid I start speaking to her and her boyfriend walks up. Or if she just says, I've got a boyfriend. And what happens if you've done a long interaction, you have a 20-minute conversation with someone you really like, and then she drops, I've got a boyfriend? Like, is there a way to find that out?
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
And what should you do in that situation?
Yeah, there's the witty comeback, because like 9 times out of 10, women don't have a boyfriend. It's a test. Right. So you got to have something to say in that moment. So for me, I would anticipate the lines maybe coming, right? And I'm like, you know what? My boyfriend could never find out about us. I'll throw it on them. So turn it into something playful. But if you're trying to gauge it early on, the thing to say would be, so how long have you been with your boyfriend for? It hasn't even been mentioned from their mouth. You're proposing that. You're saying, so how long have you been with your boyfriend for? She goes, well, you're on about, I haven't got a boyfriend. Okay, cool. We've got that out of the way. So you've
Okay.
just screened it and it just clears the path. But I will say 9 times out of 10, a woman will say that because it's their way of politely saying you haven't made enough impact with me. But then if you come back with a witty line, then the impact's made.
There's a lot of emotions on the line with dating, right? Men are scared, women are scared, and we don't actually teach them enough about how to have these interactions. Like, it's wild that obviously people turn to dating coaches because they literally have not been taught the basics. So, in that interaction, like on the flip side of this, if you're a woman and you're approached by a man and you're not interested, what are some of the best ways to let him down?
That's a great question. And I think women do need to have a bit of empathy of a guy that's giving it a go, but he's not quite there yet.
Yeah.
I would suggest to say something like, "Oh, that's really sweet of you to approach. I am. You could say I am taken, or I'm not looking to date at the moment. But don't let that discourage you, because I think what you're doing is a great thing. I really think that women should say something like that, because I speak to my female friends, and they talk about how their friends, their girlfriends, like show disinterest to a guy, and it can be quite cruel. And we just got to have a bit of empathy of, okay, well, that guy just might be in a bit of a journey with this. He's not quite there yet, but we have to understand, as I made the point earlier, we have to get those interactions in to become that guy, to become the guy that comes from that place of confidence that they do find attractive.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about successful men, because you charge up to sort of 50K for mentorship. And, I think most people would imagine, well, if you've got a spare 50K to throw to Johnny, like, why would you need a dating coach? You're rich.
Yeah.
So what are some of the issues that some of the more wealthy, men that are really doing well, that can afford to give you a big life, but yet still struggle to meet people? So what are some of their unique struggles?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, they're not too indifferent from, people from a different categories problems, really. It's just the fact they got a lot of money. But they've probably sacrificed a lot in their social and dating life to get where they are, right? So they bring me in to accelerate the learning curve. The issue I will say is that they will have a problem qualifying women, right? Which can be quite anxiety inducing when it comes to dating. They don't want to end up with the wrong woman. Right. So there's that. And it's also the lifestyle design, right? Again, if they've sacrificed a lot in their social and dating life, they may have not really looked at the design of their lifestyle and how that positions them towards opportunity. Okay, so there's that. And also just the general conversation skills. Yeah, like they've got a lot of value. They've got a lot of status. They can signal that well. That's attractive. But when it comes to actually having a deeper connection with a woman and understanding that emotional frequency, that becomes an area of misunderstanding.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Because I think a lot of people say, well, what have those men got to worry about? Surely it must be easy to get women. But it's just interesting that everyone struggles, and it doesn't really, because I think probably a lot of men probably go out there thinking I'm not rich enough. But
Yeah, I mean,
even the men that
status is important.
Yeah.
That's what we know about women. That men respond to visual beauty and women respond to signals of status. Why? Because it brings us back straight to that original point I made: safety.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So, and what I want to say is this: I think what is a problem right now, I feel, is that men think they need to earn staggering amounts of money to then start to date, right? I think there's a big fear around that. And, times have been tough over recent years. It's not the case. Men do need to do the maths of what is required of a reasonable income, because most of the time, we do the maths on what we need to earn. We're thinking about rent, we're thinking about our groceries, and maybe a holiday once a year or something like that. And that will give you a certain figure. Well, when you've got another in your life, you've also got to account for that. So I just think, do the maths on those figures of what those figures need to be, but don't let it put you off dating. Like, I think men think they have to be a completely polished product before they enter the market. Well, I'm telling you, women aren't doing that. So, so it all, don't put off the experience, like every relationship you have is vital experience to become better for the next one.
Yeah, well, you've talked a lot there about the kind of how things have changed, but also stayed the same. Is it overall harder to meet people these days, or is it a little bit easier, or have we just lost our confidence? But also to your point about a man having status or being able to provide, that is much harder today. Back 30, 40 years ago, a man could afford on one wage a house, 3 kids, and a holiday in this country once a year. Now, you sort of have 2 parents working and it's still not enough. So it's very hard for a man to be in that provider role. And obviously, people are a lot more equal these days and that's just the way the culture is going. But what do you think? Do you think overall it is harder nowadays?
I think it's been some challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to deny that. But I think you've got to own it, it's not... You could sit there and easily blame the government, blame the whatever administration and this, that, and the other. But that's not really taking responsibility of where you currently are. You always got to take responsibility of where you are and be a bit more creative as to, okay, what do I need to do? Do I need to upskill? Do I need to become a bit more entrepreneurial? Who am I sat around the wrong table? What bunch of minds do I need to be around to absorb a little bit of something of them? And, it's a bit of a cliche thing to say in the self-development world. You're the average of the 5 closest people around you. But it is true. Your brain is like a sponge. If you're around a load of people that aren't ambitious or aren't thinking big, then you're going to become the 6th person of that, So I think you need to really do an audit of where you're at and start moving in that right direction. It happens to the best of us. We get comfortable. You might have a few wins in the year and earn said amount of money, but you got to keep pushing and building. The parents are getting old. They're going to need to be looking after soon.
Yeah. Are there any cultural myths or media messages about love and sex that you wish men would unlearn? Sort of on the female side, a lot of people would say, oh, they want the Disney princess marriage and, that's just not how real world works. But is there anything you think men are being sold through sort of media that you wish that they would just stop thinking about because that's not the real world?
What springs to mind is in recent years, we had this conversation about toxic masculinity, right, which became a big buzzword. The media had a frenzy on it, was looking for the next pantomime villain. I think they found a few. And the inception of that came this phrase, vulnerability. Men need to be more vulnerable. Because when I said toxic masculinity, what the hell are they talking about? What is that? Like toxic masculinity? And I read up on it, what they were getting at. And they came up with this phrase of men aren't being vulnerable enough and not sharing their emotions. And I think we got to be really careful about how we use that word, because if we just use the word vulnerable, men need to be more vulnerable without context, you're going to get a lot of weak men, right? Which is the opposite to what you want. I think being vulnerable means that you will share your thoughts, you will share your feelings, but it also means that you can provide space for when the other is going through a turbulent time and she feels safe that she can do that around you. She doesn't want you crying and whinging and whimpering to her about things like that. That's just not attractive. It's a turnoff. Despite what they're pushing, women are not attractive to that. You've got to be a strong man. You've got to be a conduit.
I think also I think this conversation around masculinity, I actually think it's changing recently because like you say, number one, if someone told me I needed to be more open with my emotions and cry, I don't think I can. I'm sure I can physically cry, but it's just not a go-to reaction. I probably would cry sort of once every 5 years. I don't need it. So to try and force myself to do things that are unnatural to me, I don't see how that would help me. And one of the things that I was reading about recently, I mean, I don't know how true this is, but I was talking about therapy, and they were saying in a lot of therapy, the reason it's not working for men is because they don't really distinguish too much between the genders. And for women, when they're in therapy, one of the things is to help them feel safe. Whereas actually with a man, you don't need to make him feel safe. You need to make him feel powerful. I don't know how true that is. I mean, this is just an article I read, but I do think some of those gender nuances are being forgotten about, or maybe at this moment being rediscovered look, of course there's always going to be 20% of men for who that doesn't apply to, but actually for 80%, this is probably what's going to help them. So just on that, what does healthy masculinity look like to you? So if the media is running around saying it's all toxic, what does healthy masculinity look like?
Well, as I said there, it is communicating. I think a lot of problems that happen in relationships, and again, here's a vague word, it's all about communication. Like, there's so many aspects of communication, right? And I think the downfall of many relationships is where men are too afraid to express something, right? Something that they don't like about the other, or maybe a desire or something they want to do. So they bottle it up. And healthy communication, and it ties into being masculine, is being able to have that voice, have that opinion, right? At the same time, have boundaries. If a woman knows when you aren't being true to your values, and when she sees that happen, because she knows you, if she's been with you, she'll know you, she's going to lose attraction, So don't be scared to exercise your boundaries. If you don't, you're going to become the doormat, right? You will get more respect in the relationship for having boundaries, right? We need it from both sides. We need to know where the line is, and we'll give it a good go between each other, pushing each other, see what we can get away with. But we need that pushback. I think another thing in regards to healthy masculinity is the ability to manage non-verbal conflict. That doesn't mean go out and being able to just punching people up because they said something wrong, but a woman wants to be in the presence of a man that can handle himself, So that is super attractive. Again, I'm really echoing the main message here, safety. One wants to feel safe, and managing verbal conflict. So if you look at relationships, there are going to be arguments. There are going to be indifferences. And most people enter that space wanting to be the winner, right? They want to triumph the other in that interaction. It's getting to the questions of, how can we make this better? What can I do to make you feel better? The how, the what, the why. Being a bit more constructive in those instances. And that will lead you to solutions. I mean, a lot of people, they're afraid to have arguments, but an argument brings something to the surface. You're learning about something from the other. So I think that is healthy masculinity too, managing conflict verbally and non-verbally. Obviously leading, planning. I had an example of this in my own relationship the other day. We were out, and my girlfriend was triggered by something, and she just needed to be held. She just needed to be held. Women are quite emotionally turbulent, if you hadn't noticed. So she needs to feel that you provide that safe space. So there's a few things there that I feel are, and not to forget chivalry. I know that's a thing that the feminists will be like, oh no, I hate it when a guy opens a door for me and holds my bags and stuff like that. Ignore all that. Just do those things.
Do those things.
Yeah.
Well, let me build off that, actually. So I got asked recently to write an article around male role models. I actually really struggled with this. Because I do actually think a lot of the TV characters and film characters, there's more TV and film. A lot of them now, the men are either terribly damaged, which is like, well, you don't want to be terribly damaged, or they're the idiot. So when it comes to because a lot of people will style themselves off either celebrities, movie stars, or TV stars, or whatever it is. When it comes to dating, is there a TV character, a movie character, look, if you're going to emulate anyone going into an approach, emulate him? I know there's that Ryan Gosling in in
Crazy Stupid Love.
I think, is he a dating expert in that?
He's me. It's me in that film. I like this question because, having thought about it myself, initially I really struggled to find the answer of what that would be for me. And then I remembered instances where I've had clients and they're a bit confused as to how to behave in, for an example, I think his client's girlfriend at the time was supposed to meet him at 5 o'clock and it was 5:30 and he hadn't heard anything from him or whatever. And he was asking me, what should I do? How should I do it? And I go, listen, who is someone that really exudes confidence? Think of a guy that in the media or something. He's got a bit of a public profile. Who do you come to mind? Who do you think of? Jason Statham. I go, okay, all right. Jason said, yeah, he's a cool guy. Look, yeah, he's a solid dude. Looks like he's got it together. I go, so when you get these moments, I want you to call upon the thought of, what would Jason do in this moment right now? And he thought about it, and it calmed him down. His mind reached a place of stillness, and he responded in a confident way, dealt with it in a confident way. So that's an example how I've used it with clients.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'm always trying to create that movie moment.
Right. Okay.
And I think it's, when a soldier puts on his uniform, he becomes the soldier. When the clown puts on his red nose and puts on his silly hat, he becomes the clown. So it's like you got to reverse engineer that a little bit as well. And you go, okay, who do I become when I put on said outfit, right? And that primes the mind for that. And obviously for me, I guess it would be, I guess I've drawn upon a few Bond references, over my time. Yeah. But
That
I think,
old chestnut.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that Bond's not running around, Bond's still, Bond's calm. He moves at a slow pace. His voice is slow, the pacing is slow. It builds tension. If you're speaking really fast like that, it's, I'm talking, but it's all exciting, but it's not sexy. It's not, I'm nervous. But I think also something to be said here is you got to be conscious as to when you need to change your hero, right? I got a handful of friends of mine, and they're very subscribed to let's just say the rock and roll lifestyle, right? And we all know how that ends, right? So it gets to a point where you've really got to change the archetype you're almost worshipping, because it's your brain's absorbing that conditioning. So it's important to think, okay, what's more of a healthier archetype for my next chapter? And then follow that. If that makes sense.
Okay, so just finally on this one then. So who would you say is good boyfriend material? Who should you emulate when you're in a relationship? Not the sexy man that comes up and charms you in the bar, but when you're actually in a relationship, who's a good point of reference?
That's got me thinking. I
can't think James Bond was too good at the relationship.
I don't think so. Yeah, no, it didn't end too well. I can't think of someone specifically, but what I will tell you is that when you are single, you move around in a certain way, right? And you're the playful guy, you're the flirty guy, you're all of those things. And I think something I did to recondition myself in the newness of the relationships I was beginning was to consciously tell people I'm in a relationship. Yeah, I'm with someone now. I'm in a relationship now. So they see me as that guy, not the guy before.
Yeah.
Because otherwise their suggestions, their ideas will be thrown at me from what they know of me before. So it's important to hear yourself say that, and that's part of the conditioning to step into that next chapter.
Apparently I'm really good at that subconsciously. One of my best friends was saying, you give off such massive Taken vibes like all the time. It's like,
oh, yeah,
people genuinely flirting with you. You don't even realize. You're just like, oh, well, yeah. You don't even see that they're coming on to you. I was like, who? Who was coming on to it? I didn't even notice. So apparently I've got that down. Anyway, I wanted to also ask you, because obviously you're the pro, right? But everyone makes mistakes when it's approaching. Obviously you've got a girlfriend. But, when you were single and approaching people, what was sort of one thing that you judged yourself more, or that you were a bit self-conscious about when you were approaching people and trying to date people?
I got to a place where and this is the coaching, right? This is the coaching. It's to not give a shit. It's you're going over to leave someone better than you found them, right? And that's it. The one thing that you always need to be looking for is, am I pursuing an unwanted interaction? And that's something that I've got to help the guys with, because that's the guy's biggest fear. Well, what if she doesn't want to talk to me? So that's why I don't get started. So I think I'm just conscious of making them have a good experience, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean to leave with a phone number. It could be quite a warming compliment, Then they go back to the office and go, oh my God, this guy just approached me on my lunch break and told me how amazing I looked. Like that's probably made her day.
Yeah.
It's simple things like that.
Ask you, is there any stigma around what you do? Like, do people think, it's almost like a pickup artist or whatever? Like, it's because to me, it's, we're sort of at this time where we're talking about incels and about men becoming really bitter because, they can't find women. So it seems to me someone like you would be lauded as like, look, I can show us how to, eradicate incels altogether by teaching them how to approach women. But I feel like there is still stigma of like, you're teaching men how to pick up women, you horrible man. Like, what is the reaction to you?
Let's go back to what you said about, the experience in therapy. Women wanted to feel safe, men wanted to feel empowered, right? So when it comes to marketing to the male audience, a lot of guys, they don't want to admit they've got problems in their dating life. you know? So then you have to speak to the male audience. You have to use such language that gets them in the door. And, you know, a decade ago, yeah, we saw the birth and the inception, the rise of the pickup community. And for once, guys could finally come out of the house and go, yeah, that's something. I'm a pickup guy. I'm a pickup guy. Yeah, all this kind of stuff. Like, it empowered them, right? And that's what got them out to these events. But when you water it down, that's when you start having trouble getting guys out the door, right? Be perfect for women. You know, they have no problem. They'll bring their sister, their friend, you know, auntie, be a day out. But men, it's not empowering. So that's what we know. And in terms of how the media treat me, I mean, it depends which way the wind blows. What's the trending topic right now? They're always looking for a pantomime villain, but I'm not that guy. You know, I'm not that guy. The cold approach, the pickup, or whatever language you want to use, it has to exist. It has to exist. Like it's the start. You know, like nothing can happen without the cold approach. So you know, you have to dance around the media a little bit, and you have to. You know, I get a lot of journalists approach me, but I have to vet them out to see, okay, what's the agenda here? What's the treatment? What are they trying to do? But mostly, I think, you know, they've all been kind and good to me, which I'm thankful for. But I think
That's good.
I'm conscious though. I'm conscious of, you know, there were a couple of bad apples, I would say, in the industry that just took it too far with the marketing. And of course, you know, that they made themselves available for the bloody lineup parade. Like it was silly what they were doing.
Let's talk about some of your advice then, because I'm guessing a lot of people would find this conversation because they are probably struggling a little bit in their love life and looking for a little bit of advice. So what would you say are some of your top 3 tips for making a strong impression, whether that is in person, which is sort of your main thing, or what a lot of people do now, sliding into the DMs? Because I was reading when I was researching for you, you know, I don't think this was your advice, but someone was saying, don't open with a compliment. She's heard compliments. Open with a funny observation or something like that. So in that kind of spirit, what would you say your top 3 tips for making that first impression?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, wherever you read that from, it's about breaking a pattern. So you're always looking to break the expected pattern, okay? You can open with a compliment, but be a bit creative with it. You know, if she's got nice eyes, guess what? She knows she's got nice eyes. She's heard it a million times before, you know, but what is it about her eyes that draws your attention towards them? You know, excuse me, I had to come over. Just the way that you put your makeup together today really draws my attention towards your eyes. It's Johnny, by the way. That's going to make impact. I'm still saying that she's got nice eyes, but I'm languaging up a bit and adding a bit more flavor. So I think let's not be lazy with the dialogue that we're using. Let's enjoy being creative with the compliment. And again, to the point of observation, you know, if you can be more observational, that's fantastic. You know, what is she wearing? Is there a clue as to maybe the industry she's in or the hobby that she's involved in? You know, look at her posture. Look for clues that could aid you for the opener. We're looking for detailed compliments, okay? I said it earlier on, holding eye contact, right? Don't overstay the welcome, right? A lot of people, they get a bit too excited, right? And what's going to happen is you're going to try and see how long you can have this interaction for. You're going to run out of things to say, and then you're going to go for the phone number. You know, so it's kind of gone. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. So, yeah, let's stay in touch. That's what she remembers when you're texting her. That's what she remembers when your name pops up and you're trying to call her. Where are you anchoring that emotion? Are you anchoring it on the peak? Or you're anchoring it on the lull. And I think this is something that, you know, we're told, aren't we? Like, oh, one day you'll meet someone, you know, mum and dad. Oh, you'll meet someone. And you think, and then you end up talking, it seems to go, God, yeah, it's happening. And then you get a bit excited. But when you get that feeling of, oh, this is fun, that serves as the indicator to get the number and get out of there. Because that's the point of excitement. And that's what she's going to remember. Okay?
So is there... I mean, you're talking more, and I guess it would always depend on the conversation, but is there an ideal length of time men should have in their head of like, just get it, this rolling on a little bit now, time to get out of here?
I'll be honest, like 3 minutes.
3 minutes, wow.
In a daytime.
Is that different based on the setting? Like,
yes.
If you see a nice woman in the street or in the supermarket, that's clearly got to be different to if you're in a bar, where you can maybe then say, do you want to come over with
Yeah,
girls?
I
Or
mean, nightlife's a completely different animal. You got so many aspects you can play around with. You can bounce to another part of the bar or the restaurant, explore a different territory, or you could introduce them to some people that you've met earlier on, or some of your friends. You can add all these sort of ingredients into the pot. But I'm genuinely speaking, look, it's a beautiful day outside. If I was going to walk up the high street now and grab a coffee or a bite to eat, I'm gonna interact with someone on the way, and it's going to be a 3 minute interaction. Because you got to start to think like, okay, if this is just something that everyone can apply. Everyone's got a lunch break. What are you doing at your lunch break? You sat in you seated in the canteen at your office, or are you taking the opportunity to get out there and go to that cute little delicatessen or juice bar, and you're gonna have some interactions there. Those interactions shouldn't really be more than 3 minutes, because they start to think, well, why has this guy got so much time on his hands? Like your stock
yeah,
price just starts plummeting the longer you stay in the interaction. You got to use like
interesting.
you got to be like, what? Like, I could literally talk to you all day, but I've really got to get back to the office. What's the best way to stay in touch? So she goes, oh, okay, look, subtle little clues of like, okay, I'm not the priority right now, because she doesn't need to. She doesn't want to feel like the priority. She wants to feel that you're a confident guy, and you might have other options at this stage. She doesn't want to feel pedestaled, and you've got a job.
Yeah.
You've got your priorities in order.
Cheeky question then.
Mm.
As we said at the top of the show, like a lot of men struggle with this in person approach. The majority of men are getting no swipes on dating apps. Is it the best time ever to just be a confident guy and just start approaching women? Like, is it
Oh, I'm
just
telling
like
you, absolutely.
actually this is the time because so many other men are not doing it?
Let me tell you,
Or is it
yeah,
the flip of it that women are not used to being cold approached?
women are used to being cold approached, but unfortunately not in the correct way. So the moment the stud pulls up, and delivers the goodies, she gets excited. She's like, wow, this is the movie moment I've been looking for. And that's the motivator. I've said this before, like, let's just say, you looked outside, but what a beautiful day. Do you know what? I'm going to go in and take a walk in the park. And you start speaking to this girl, she's got a cute dog or whatever, and you make it about her, you exchange details, and you end up to date that girl. She becomes your girlfriend. Remember, that's the story that is going to be constantly recycled on every social occasion, every social event. How did you guys meet? You know what? He was more interested in his dog before he met me. He always took a walk for a park. We got chatting. We've been dating ever since. That's a cool story. Versus we swiped each other on Hinge.
Yeah, you do
Come
get
on,
those
man.
couples now that try and pretend that was not how they met.
Yeah, exactly.
I've
It's
got a
always
couple of friends like that. It's like,
yeah.
we met on a bus whilst we were swiping. Right, so just a few quick ones to finish. Right, so
Cool.
young guy or older guy is watching this interview now and is thinking, you know what, Johnny's totally right. I need to get some confidence and I need to start approaching people in person. Where are the best places, in your opinion, that you would find receptive people open to a cold approach?
Great question. First of all, I've got a rule that you always want to choose landscapes where the ratio is in your favor. So
Okay.
if you're interested in women, where are those environments? I'm starting to think, those something more health orientated. Women are very health conscious. As I said earlier, the juice bars. I'm thinking the park. I'm thinking, um, an exercise class that is more orientated towards women. You're the cheeky bugger at the back, but then you realize you're not the only one. There's a couple other guys who got the same idea, and the same advice for women. Same advice for women. I give advice on my Instagram a while back about going to a car concourse. Like a classic car fair. This is a big pool for affluent men. And you see like a few clever women are clued up on it, and they position themselves and give themselves the opportunity. So it's subjective, right? You've got to work out what sort of women that you're interested in, and again, reverse engineer it. Think, okay, where are they likely to be? So it's and that's what I think not a lot of us do. When you go, oh, what's your type? And you go, well, what's my type? Blonde. What do you mean? What's my type? Big boobs. What do you mean? What's my type? That's as far as you get with guys. But with women, they tend to understand a bit more about what they're actually looking for the paternal qualities for the long term. Guys, we just pedestal women on their beauty. That needs to change. And then you can start to think about the character and what they're doing with themselves. So, I mean, women love restaurants. Women love going to restaurants. I don't think you can go wrong there. Find out where the cool happening spots are. I mean, if you hadn't noticed, the nightlife landscape has shifted quite a bit. I think the traditional setup now is more sort of restaurant, bar, DJ. That is the concept everywhere, which means you could pull up there, have a drink at the bar with a friend or even on your own, and you're going to get those women that pull up to the bar as well. Mostly, you know, they'll have a bite to eat and they'll have a bit of a boogie afterwards. So it gives you an opportunity. All those women you see seated down with their friends, you're going to be able to speak to them in a moment. So I mean, that for me is like bread and butter restaurant scene on that sort of concept.
Yeah. What about for guys? Because one of the final questions I wanted to ask you was about city life versus like if you're in a town. Because I think you said at some point in this interview, London's the best city to date. Interestingly, I mean, I know that I'm, you know, almost a decade into a relationship, so it's a bit different for me. But I swear there's no single people left in London. I don't know anyone that's single, but maybe I'm of a certain age now. How is dating in a smaller town where maybe the pool is a bit smaller, there's not as much going on? Like, what would you do if you were in a smaller place? And do you really think London is the best place to date?
Yeah, I really do. I think it's a cultural melting pot. I think, you know, whatever flavor you're into, it's here. It's like an ice cream parlor. You know, you can pick out any flavor you want and experience it. You know, what have we got? We got like 12 million people here. 12 million people here, and it's such a dense place, you know, and there's so many things to do. There's so many things to do. And I think the hardest thing is finding out where the access is, or aligning yourself with the things that interest you. Sorry, I went off a tangent, but back to your question. What was it? It was
So I was asking, where are the best places to date if you're out of a big city?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it brings me to think about a guy I'm consulting at the moment, and, you know, he's all the way in like Devon. Right. And he's like super saver mindset. You know, he's working in finance, and in COVID, he moved back into the family home. He's 38 and he's still in the bloody family home, you know? And I said, look, this is not cool. That you need your own domain. You need your own place. You need your own place where you can manage your own disputes and conflict. You know, you have privacy. Like, these are just the basics. And I said, how are you meeting people? And he's meeting in the regionals, you know, apps are used quite heavily. You know, and he's one of these guys that's caught up in a cycle of using the apps, not working out. I said, listen, you just got to get yourself closer to the action. You need high turnover of people. So, you know, I've pushed him to move to either Bristol or Exeter, because there is nothing going on in the sticks where he is, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I always think about, you know, when my grandmother passed away, you know, my dad and his brother inherited a little bit of money, nothing significant, but it allowed my uncle to sell his house down south here and move all the way to a place that I can only really describe as like the Emmerdale set. You know, it was like, there is no opportunity there. There is no opportunity for dating. The only opportunity is the barmaid and everyone in the village is waiting to have a go on. Like, it's like, if that is your situation, right, you've got to move to the more populated area. You have to. And you need to start making new friends, building new communities. I mean, that's something I'm always doing, where I'm looking at guys where they live, find out their area, and I'm looking at the population. And I'm seeing if that needs to be a thing I need to advise on. Yeah, but look at that. You know, I mean, I grew up in Reading, and I think I had a population at a time of like 350,000 people or whatever. Sounds a lot, but it doesn't take long to meet everyone. You know, all the candidates.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, because in that 350,000, there's only going to be a small percentage of people that are single within an age range you'd want to date that are going to find you attractive.
That's exactly it.
It just keeps going down and down and down.
But
people.
But when you're in a city, people move to the city. Why? To go after their careers. So, you know, to climb the career ladder. You're always going to get a new cycle coming in. You know, it's like a conveyor belt. You know, and for the single guy, I mean, that's for the single guy that's really enjoying the lifestyle of meeting women and having all these experiences. You got to be careful to not stay on the sushi train for too long. You know, I always say it's like you're sat at the Yo Sushi counter and there's another nice bit of sushi coming out. Oh, I'll have a bit of that. I'll have a bit of that. You know, there'll be a time where like you got to get yourself off that and you know, go for something a bit deeper.
Yeah. Right, let's wrap this one up. So, if someone found this conversation, it's a guy struggling with dating, and there was one piece of advice you wanted him to take from this conversation, what would it be?
Make new friends. Make new friends. Whatever your situation is now, if you're resorting heavily onto dating apps, or you're saying, oh, I just can't meet the right people, dating is always going to be the byproduct of having community. If your friends have moved on to their next chapter, they've settled down and they're doing the wife and 2.3 kids or whatever thing, it doesn't mean that's the end of your chapter. It means that you need to make some new friends. So make new friends. I think the biggest thing that we're not talking about is loneliness. That's the real pandemic that's going on, right? So let's just start with making friends. You might be one person away from meeting the next love of your life.
Yeah, but the majority of people do meet people through friends, don't they?
Yeah, exactly.
If someone thinks this conversation was great, but actually they need to talk to you themselves and get some coaching, where should they go?
Yeah, my website is johnnycassell.com. Socials, I'm mainly active on Instagram, so it's at London Dating Coach. And yeah, look, I've got a ton of free stuff. I've got over 250 videos on YouTube that will get you started. But if you're looking for a bit more hand holding and want to accelerate on time, then yeah, check out our coaching programs on the website.
Johnny, thank you so much. That was brilliant.
Thanks, Lewis. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.